Hi, everyone. This is Lucky Tran for March for Science, and welcome back to the March for Science Media Zone. We are back talking about the Vote for Science series, where we're talking to activists, organizers, communicators, and political candidates about the science issues involved in this election. From the pandemic to climate change to censorship of scientists, there's so many important issues this year. And importantly, we want to get you, our community, off the sidelines and to get involved in standing up for science this election season. So we have a really special guest today, and I'm excited to introduce you to Dr. Merav Ben-David. Dr. Ben-David is a wildlife ecologist, climate scientist, and the Democratic nominee for US Senate in Wyoming. For the past 20 years, Dr. Ben-David has been a professor in zoology, physiology at the University of Wyoming, where she has earned numerous awards for excellence in teaching. In a campaign for the Senate, she has been endorsed by Vice President Joe Biden, Senator Elizabeth Warren, Senator Ed Markey, the Sierra Club, and Friends of Earth Action. Dr. Ben-David, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure joining you.
First I want to start about hearing about your journey from being a scientist to running for office. You know, it's something our community is very interested in and getting more involved as scientists and science advocates into politics. So tell me what inspired you to run and tell me about your science background. How do you go from studying polar bears to becoming a political candidate?
In fact, you hit it right on the nail on the head, because this is what got me into this race. I was a chief scientist on an expedition to the Arctic Ocean back in October 2009. We were using a Coast Guard icebreaker to go all the way up to 80 degrees north to recapture some polar bears that we instrumented the spring before on shore or near shore. And we were, it was Halloween, just about, having the interview today is really appropriate because it was basically the same time of year. And we were all the way up at 80 degrees north. All the ice projection maps that we got from NOAA and NASA and the Norwegian Polar Institute suggested that we were going to be breaking ice. At the end of October, the Arctic Ocean was supposed to be all frozen. And so, we were going to break ice, and yet we were cruising in open water, very little ice around us. And it made me realize that our projections and our expectations of climate change are optimistic. And when I returned home, I was hit with another realization, and that was the bark beetles eruption here in the Rocky Mountains. One of the reasons we have such incredible wildfire this year. A lot of these dead trees are burning right now. And I realized again that being a scientist and collecting the data and disseminating the results within the scientific community was just not enough, and I needed to do more. And I joined a group called, as soon as it was established, called Citizen Climate Lobby. And the Citizen Climate Lobby is a group, nonpartisan, very dedicated to advocating for mitigation of climate change. So I joined that group back when it first started, and done quite a bit of advocacy work here locally. And as my climate-related research has progressed, I realized that even that is not enough, because politicians can choose whether they listen to scientists or not. And in many cases, they don't listen to science. And so I realized that people will have a harder time ignoring the message that we scientists are trying to convey. Policymakers will have a hard time ignoring us if we were one of them, if we join them in the process of policy making. And so that's why I jumped in this race.
That's so fantastic. That was so inspiring to hear your story. I'm interested in actually I think there are probably a lot of overlapping skills as a research scientist and a politician. There are also many new skills, right? So I'm interested to hear, what did you find difficult in the process? What did you have to learn to do? What did you find that you can transfer right across? And actually, what reactions have you gotten from your colleagues and other scientists to, your journey?
Of course. So actually there is a lot that is transferable. because especially in modern science, we don't do things alone. We collaborate, and we collaborate across multiple disciplines. The broader collaboration, the better our work turns out to be, right? And so the same thing is true for working as a politician. And so I think the skills that we bring to the table as scientists are excellent, and we are well poised to join the political arena and the political effort, because we are trained nowadays to work with others, to learn new languages. The one thing that was challenging, I have to say, is being trained as a scientist for nearly 40 years now, and learning how to convey the message in a very careful and very poised and very measured way is not necessarily how we need to reach out to people and explain our results and our science to others. I think that was the biggest challenge. It is still a challenge, because the way we are used to informing our colleagues is not a way that is best to communicate concerns to the general publics. Not concerns, ideas, any idea. It doesn't have to be a concern. It can be a really cool, exciting idea. How do you take that and translate it into a language and have the power behind it to influence people's opinions? That is very, very different. And that's something that I'm still learning. It's a very steep learning curve. I have to say that even in the sciences, we are realizing that. So not only we have learned how to work across disciplines and collaborate within the sciences, but we are also embracing science communication. And to me, that is a huge step forward. I have to say that we have some of the best science communicators here in Wyoming, at the University of Wyoming. I have amazing colleagues here that are doing phenomenal work. And I think that the more we embrace science communication and teach our graduate students and our students in general how to do messaging, it will be easier for us as scientists to engage with other professionals, with non-scientists, with the general public. And I think that I am seeing it, we are making huge progress in that direction. And I'm very, very happy with this. I also want to take the opportunity and thank my team that are amazing messengers. They know how to take my scientific language and make it a lot more palatable. So, yeah.
I love that. I'm actually a trained scientist myself who went into science communication. So my day job now involves training scientists how to do it. So I love that you talk about that. And it is so important, right? Particularly in the arena of politics, where we're talking about ideas, we're talking about values, we're talking about real, how things affect people's real lives. And that's really important to hone that message.
Right.
I want to move from that to talk. Yeah.
Think about all the illustrations and the artwork and animations that people have made at the beginning of the pandemic to explain what it means to, step out of the line and reduce the transmission rate of the virus. Those were phenomenal. I'm actually surprised we're not still using them, because they would make so much sense even today as they did in April.
They would. Speaking of messaging, I really want to talk about your ad, because it was so amazing to see. And, this is what we're talking about, right? How do we talk about science within the frames of political messaging? And I thought that was such a great example to it. We're going to link it in the description. Everyone should watch it. It's an amazing ad. For me, when I saw it, it was incredible, because I saw it on Twitter, and then all my friends started sending it to me because they knew I would love this sort of framing. And for me, just tracking from politics and, around elections all the time, I would literally count in debates the number of mentions of science or science issues in previous debates over the last decade or so. It was never mentioned. And now it's incredible to me. You go from that to every debate, science issues are mentioned, whether it's the pandemic or climate change. And as a candidate, you can run with an ad that's just focused on I'm a scientist. So, and one of the frames of this is something that I really hate that politicians use when they want to oppose evidence-based policy, and they say, I'm not a scientist, right? It's been a pet peeve of mine. So tell me about the inspiration for that ad and, what the meaning behind it. You're saying you're a scientist. There are politicians who are saying, I'm not a scientist. Tell us about that.
Right. So as you say, it didn't take too much thought to come up with this idea. We've been saying, how can these politicians ignore the facts? I mean, it's so obvious. How can they, so that's where, in internal discussions with the team. And as I told you, I have an excellent team and they know how to convert scientific ideas into messaging, popular messaging. And so this is how it came about. And they wrote the script and it was really easy to put together because it's a message that is, it's the message. It's about time we stopped ignoring science. We are putting incredible effort to understand the universe we live in, from planetary science to molecular levels and nano materials. Science is leading the way of life that we lead right now. And yet, whenever a politician wants to ignore and the priorities lay with, business rather than science, they can say, well, I'm just not a scientist. Well, I don't understand this. I'm not a scientist. Don't expect me to. My point is, if you don't understand the science, you shouldn't be making decisions. You should not be out there making that. You don't need to be a scientist. You can consult a scientist, but don't ignore what you learn. We are not in a position. Our situation right now in the United States, around the globe, is such we cannot ignore science. We can no longer, we can't pretend that what we know doesn't exist. I know a lot of people do, but we can't because it will cost us with our lives. We can't afford this. And so my message to politicians, not only, hey, elect a scientist, elect me as a scientist, elect other scientists that are currently running, and we have quite a few. Let's elect scientists and put us in positions of power, where we can make decisions that are scientific and fact-based and evidence-based. But also, if you don't understand the science, you should not be making decisions. So we need to elect not only scientists, but also intelligent people that can understand scientific evidence.
Thank you for that. Absolutely. It's so important. Maybe you could talk about, especially at the federal level, and then maybe we'll zoom into Wyoming a little bit later, I guess how science is playing a role in this election. And actually from the frame of March for Science, right? In 2017, you said, you joined us in the streets of DC. We had millions around the world in reaction. And the initial spark was websites removing climate change from their language at federal government agencies, whether it's national parks or NOAA, all of these important sites were removing this language, or the EPA. So really, everything you're saying is absolutely true, but it's not happening right now, right? Across from federal to state to local level, scientists aren't being listened to. So how do we change that going forward? How can we protect scientists from censorship? And more than that, how do we make sure that the voice of scientists is in the room in these important policy-making decisions?
Right. So again, I think this is a multi-pronged issue. And the first one is that I think especially the current pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, really highlighted the divergent attitudes. And again, it's not just in the United States, we see it all over the globe, of people who embrace science and are willing to accept and act on scientific evidence, and the people who are either motivated by short-term self-interests, or that are, and I see that a lot when I talk to people across Wyoming, and I'll bring it to Wyoming earlier maybe than you intended. People are afraid of reality. People know what is happening. People understand the consequences of what is happening, but the future is really, really scary. Whether you're going to lose your job, whether your favorite place in the world is going to burn down, whether your town is going to be wiped out because of a hurricane, and my thoughts are with New Orleans at the moment. I think people are afraid. And one of the things that maybe we should consider when we message, when we talk about pandemics, when we talk about climate change, when we talk about what the future will look like, even what the future economy will look like. We are talking about automation and robotics taking over a lot of people's jobs. We need to offer solutions. And that's where collaboration, again, across, I wouldn't call it disciplines, but across sectors. The scientific sector that does the discovery and development of technology with the business sector that actually puts it into action and creates the jobs. We need to do more of that, because if we don't give people hope, if we don't give people, provide people with solutions, the natural reaction is, this is too scary and I can't think about it and I can't do anything. And so I'm going to ignore this. And not only that, I'm going to do everything in my power to deny it. I've been all over Wyoming. I've talked to many people, and as you know, Wyoming's economy is heavily reliant on fossil fuels. Coal, oil, and gas are our number one revenue source and a big employer in the state. People know it's going away. I have not talked to a single person who actually works in a coal mines or the oil fields or in related industries, supportive industries. Not a single person on the ground. I'm not talking about politicians. I'm not talking about the CEOs. I'm not talking about the people who do the messaging for them, but not a single person on the ground said, oh no, oil is going to stay here forever. Coal is going to be, no. They all say, well, maybe we have 2 more years. Maybe we have 5 more years. People realize what is happening. And the question is, so why don't you do something about it? Is because we don't know what to do. Nobody has come and offered us any solutions. What am I going to do? I work in the coal mines. I've worked in coal mines for 30 years. What am I going to do tomorrow? Tell me what I can do. And when I come up and say, hey, we have out of this new industries we can bring here. There are new things happening all the time. Just read Science Magazine and you'll find out about, we're talking about, computing. And I'm like, did you guys ever heard about DNA computing? Do you know what that can do for us? Do you know what we can do with it in Wyoming? People are like, no, we've never heard of this. What does it mean? So I think our messaging can be improved if we also add, this is not going to continue working the way it is, but here is an alternative. Here is something that we can do in the future. People are going to be a lot more receptive to our message.
Yeah, absolutely. Solutions are so important to talk about. And I do think the climate movement hasn't, and I think maybe scientists are a little guilty of this, and I can understand because we see the graphs going up, right? We see the warnings of what's happening. And so it's a natural thing to sort of say, these are the bad things that are happening to the world. But I think it's not, sometimes there's a misunderstanding, I feel like, that is only an education thing and that people don't know or, they don't understand enough. Like you're saying, people understand what's happening, but if there are no solutions, how can we change things? So I definitely want to talk about solutions. So how do we go from this state where we're in on climate, right? We're pulling out of the Paris Agreement. That is the polar opposite, depending on what happens in this election, of course, to where we need to be. And scientists are saying, we need unprecedented changes in society to avert the worst effects of climate change. That's in the IPCC 1.5 degree report. Right. How do we move from, where we are at right now quickly enough to something like a Green New Deal, or what policies do we need to throw in and implement straight away?
So my point is that the Paris Climate Accord, and I have been saying it all across Wyoming, and people tell, don't talk about this because this is very unpopular here. But the reason is, the way I talk about it is, here is an example of how we can achieve solutions, how we can come up with great ideas that will bring solutions that we can then follow if we have the right leadership. Look, the Paris Climate Accord, it wasn't just governments and just politicians or a handful of. This was a global effort, 200 countries, multiple corporations, people, leaders in agriculture, non-governmental environmental groups, private citizens. This was an effort that brought everybody together and came up with a solution. Now you can say, okay, this solution isn't enough anymore. We're past what our goals were. The Paris Climate Accord is no longer, the gold standard we should shoot for. Yeah, okay, I agree. But it is an excellent example of how we can address this issue, how we can work together, how we can come together to find solutions, and it doesn't matter where in the world we live. So to me, the Paris Climate Accord is a blueprint. Just like when you think about the Green New Deal or the New Deal back in post-Depression, Great Depression, where the FDR administration basically they created an action plan. I like the action plan. I'm a member of the IUCN Species Survival Commission. We like action plans. So here's an action plan. It's the same type of idea. Again, a bridge between science and policy and politics is come up with a good plan. And then we already have the blueprints of how to take the plans and implement them. And I'm very optimistic. I'm saddened to see all that we haven't accomplished what we set to accomplish in the Paris Accord. But at the same time, I'm optimistic that we have the blueprints that we need to actually achieve a lot. And all we need is good leadership. What we are lacking, and the reason I entered this race, the reason why I'm putting my heart and soul into winning this race, and I hope people will join and help us these last few days in doing that, is because there is a solution. We have blueprints on how we can take scientific evidence, translate it into policy, and then use the blueprint of the New Deal, the Paris Climate Accord, to actually implement it.
Thank you. And yeah, I'd like to shift about talking about the pandemic. You mentioned it a couple of times before. We are seeing surging rates around the country right now, more so than even ever before. It's been such a long time and people are getting tired of following public health guidelines, and people are suffering economically and in their lives too. So, and we haven't had leadership at the national level, probably at the state level, at the city level in many cases, in terms of listening to scientists and getting the messages out there and helping people in real ways. How do we handle this pandemic going forward? What do we need to do to protect our communities from further harm and help them in this situation?
Right. So it's we have to do quite a few things, but the first thing is making sure people are not left behind, because as you said, people have right now, American people have absolutely no resources left to deal with the pandemic. People have to go to work, and people have to send their kids to school because without that, they can't go to work. I think it's a shame, a crying shame, that the HEROES Act hasn't been passed by the Senate. I am completely disappointed with especially the Wyoming delegation, federal delegation, because Wyoming is at the forefront of this. We are one of the worst in terms of the surge of the pandemic right now. It has not been this bad in the beginning here, and now it is impossible because people cannot follow even if people wanted to follow the guidelines, they're unable to. We need to make sure that people get, individuals, families, working families get the money they need to survive this. This is a crisis. that small businesses can survive this crisis, that state governments get the resources they need to stay open. Wyoming is a classic example. We are cutting Department of Corrections. We are cutting teachers. We are cutting, Department of Transport. We're cutting not the fat. We've cut the fat here in Wyoming 10 years ago. We've cut the skin and bone and muscle 4 years ago, and now we're cutting into the bone. We need to pass the HEROES Act now to help Wyoming and all other states to weather this crisis. And then when people can afford to relax, okay, I can feed my kids, then we can start saying, okay, here's the messaging, here is the data, here is what we can do. And again, bring back those amazing science communications that we had in April. Why not? Bring it, remind people of this, create new ones that are even more exciting. And I think, New Zealand has done it, China has done it, South Korea has done it. It is doable. We can do it if we take action, reduce transmission, and if people are willing to compromise just a little bit. Putting a mask on is not a big deal. I have to tell you, we had terrible smoke in Laramie for 2 weeks because of the Mulan fire that we had here, one of the largest in recent histories, one of the largest wildfires in recent history, just like the ones in California and Colorado. I walked my dogs outside alone. I was in the middle of nowhere and I had to wear a mask, not because of COVID, but because of the smoke. It was impossible to breathe. So wearing a mask is really not a big deal. And there is a group in Wyoming that is a group of history buffs that right when the pandemic started, posted on Facebook pictures and posts from the 1918 flu pandemic, where people in Wyoming, railroad workers, loggers, right here outside of Laramie, were doing their work. They were working with masks on. So there are a lot of things we can do, but the first thing we need to do is make sure that people are not forced to work if possible. I mean, the essential workers will never be able to have everybody stay home, but simple measures that we know scientifically work. The study from Kansas is classic. Those counties that enforced the mask mandate have a much lower transmission rate than the others that didn't. So yeah, the data is very clear. There are a lot of things that we can do. They're not very complicated. And I think we should advocate for that.
Thank you. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about Wyoming, and particularly, you mentioned some of the climate and pandemic issues around Wyoming, but particularly as a scientist running in Wyoming, sort of what science issues are there in play in Wyoming, and what local issues, as a representative, what would you like to sort of bring there?
So the most immediate threat to Wyoming, and that's what I've been saying on the campaign trail, that's what people tell me on the campaign trail, is it's the economic meltdown because of climate change. We have severe droughts more often than not, and they're projected to increase in frequency and severity, although I don't know how much more severe it can be than this summer. It's pretty bad. We have projections for increased wildfires that put a lot of our communities at risk. But the most pressing one is the economic fallout from the loss of revenue from the fossil fuel industry. Wyoming leadership failed a decade or two ago in not diversifying our economic portfolio. And we are in very bad shape right now because we have one industry that funds everything. Even my salary as a professor at the university is dependent on revenue from coal, oil, and gas. And I'm just bringing it as an example. I'm just one of many, many, many people who can and are affected by this. And so for Wyoming, really the biggest challenge is what can we do in the very near future to make sure that we have a viable economy? Because all the things that I mentioned before the drought and wildfires and changes to our ecosystems are also going to affect the next two largest sectors of the economy, which is tourism and agriculture. So if you think about what Wyoming is facing, we are facing water shortages because we don't get the snowpack. That even when we did this year, we got an excellent snowpack, but it melted so early that we don't have water left right now. Much less than we've had in anticipated given the snowpack. So a lot of things are going to happen in Wyoming that will affect all our sources of income and all our, the ranchers, the tourism industry are all going to be negatively affected. And so these are the things that, bringing that data, bringing that science, the facts to the users. Ranchers understand drought. They do. They just need to know what to look forward to into the future, which is what we do with predictive models, which depend on climate modeling, to bring into the reality or the realization of the tourism industry. What will be the consequences when you don't have, you can't support the hunting industry that we have right now. When you don't have the skiing industry is going to suffer. The snow machining, we have a lot of snow machining in Wyoming. So every single thing about Wyoming's economy is threatened by climate change. And we need to do a good job. And I'm hoping that I am and my campaign is doing, bringing it to the attention of everyone in Wyoming that it's time to act. And we need to act now, even before anybody else does, because we are at the forefront of this challenge.
Thank you. And I'd like to finish sort of on a more general note. I wonder if you could share some advice for scientists right now who are in the lab right now and that, they're feeling really passionate about making change politically. How can they get involved in politics? Maybe running like a candidate like you, or, providing advice on the Hill, or, in the myriad of ways of becoming more active and political. Maybe you could share some of your experience with our community.
Absolutely. So first of all, just like we say, think globally and act locally, the same is true for politics. You can start by sitting on a school board. You can run for county commissioner. You can, run for the state legislature. Things that, by the way, I didn't do, but I do see the extreme value of doing that. And you need to realize that there are a lot of things that are similar between being a scientist and being a politician, because really a lot of it depends on data. And being a good politician or a good candidate means you have to rely on data. It's more social sciences type of data, but it is data. And not that please don't get me wrong, social scientists are scientists, but just for me as a biologist, it took a while to realize, hey, it's the same type of approaches that, it's just data on people and their preferences and their priorities and what. And so there is a lot of similarity. It's not, in that respect, it's not a big leap. Again, I think the main challenge is the messaging. And I would even be a little blunt and say, we need to do it whether we are entering politics or not. We have to be a little more forward and bold in our messaging, because it's moral obligation. We have a moral obligation to make sure everybody understands how they make decisions, how they vote, what information they're using to make a voting decision. We have to make sure people know what they're voting for or what they're voting against. And if we are not out there, if we are not sharing what we learned, we are not servicing our communities as we should.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you today. How can people find out more about your work, and do you have anything coming up that you'd like to talk about?
So, we have 4.5 days left. We need more people to help us calling and texting. And a lot, of course, if people can donate to the campaign, that will be incredible. Help us keep our radio and TV ads going. As you said, some of our ads are pretty cool. We have more than just the one you've seen probably that we've put together to try and get the message out. So if you want to connect, you can go to bendavid2020.com and check us out and volunteer. Calling people is probably the best way right now to reach them.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Ben David. It was a real pleasure having you on today. And I'd like to thank everyone in the March for Science community for watching. Please get out there and vote safe. We are, of course, in a pandemic, as we've been talking about, so please be careful, but you can get out and participate in democracy by remembering the acronym SAFE: sanitize, appropriate distance, face mask, and early vote. So please make a plan, get out there with your friends and family, get involved and vote for science. Thank you, everyone, and bye.